This is a long-awaited review of my Ducati Desert Sled. I've owned it for about a year, and I'm going to tell you all about it, the good, the bad, what I would change, and whether or not you should buy one of these awesome machines. So let's just get into it. I wanted a new motorcycle when I moved to Los Angeles. I said that I could only ever live here if I owned a motorcycle to be able to get around traffic, and that's exactly what this thing helps me do, aside from when I'm out here carving up the canyons. Power wise, it's got enough power to get around town. Coming from a 300, there was no way that I'd be able to ride that in Los Angeles because you just can't keep up with folks on the freeway. This thing, no problem. It's not crazy kill you speed, but you can really get going on the highway, which I love. Starting from the front, working to the way back, let's just run through what I love about this bike. Obviously, you can't neglect the retro styling with the gold and white with the blue accents. It looks nothing like a Ducati that you're used to. There are only trace amounts of red on this bike, which throws people off when they come up and ask me what kind of bike it is. The gold wheels and the blue just remind me of that like Subaru Rally that is just reminiscent of being off-road and in the dirt. So I think they nailed it with this styling. The forks are a little taller than your typical scrambler, which is great for that off-road capability. For just me being a taller rider, I'm 6'2", 200 pounds, so I can always rely on my front suspension to soak up any sort of potholes that I might miss, especially here in Los Angeles. Above that, the headlight has LED running lights and then a halogen headlight, which I wish that they would have just came with the LEDs for both out the factory, but you can swap that out at any time. I haven't done it yet. Next to that, I added additional lights to help me kind of see at night, which are the Baja Squadrons. They have two sets of lamps that go straight out and two that go to the side. So I get quite a bit of spread, especially at night. Probably too much if you would ask drivers because it's definitely really bright. But I'm never behind someone so long that I need to worry about it. So I'll just be on my way and you might have to deal with it for like 30 seconds at most. Above that, I've got the bar end mirrors, which are great because it puts your mirrors out wide and you're able to see everything that's on the left and the right of you. The center of the bars have this little crossbar, which is great for kind of throwing a GoPro. I've also got a switch hooked up to the lights that run off of auxiliary power, which means that they only turn on when the bike is on. And then right next to that, I've got a quad lock for my phone to give me all my directions as I'm riding. Behind that, you've got your gas tank. It's your just standard gas tank. And then the seat is the updated seat for the newer model on the 2021s, which I find relatively comfy. No complaints there. Behind that, I've also added the stock foot pegs for if I ever want to take a passenger. And then behind that, the most notable thing is the panniers and top case, as well as the rack that I have set up. That came with the bike when I bought it, and I've loved the fact that I can do more than just bike things on the Ducati. I can go out for grocery runs, I can come out to the canyons, bring out all my camera gear. There's just nothing that you can't do with a rear setup like that, and any bike that I keep from now on will have something like that, so I can bring all the stuff. I've even taken this thing to the airport and brought a carry-on and strapped it. So you can really load this thing up and it does just fine. Behind that, I haven't done the tail tidy kit because I actually don't mind the license plate holder. I know a lot of people will chop that off, but I do like the way that the tail lights are integrated with the fender. So I'll be keeping that. And then on the other side is the just stock exhaust that comes with the motorcycle. It's got enough grunt to it where it's not annoying and it's not overly loud, but at some point I will be replacing it with a Termione aftermarket exhaust that I've heard on similar bikes that just sounds so good and so grumbly. There's just no other way to describe it. So that will be one of my future updates when I get the extra cash. So we've gone front to back about what is on the bike, what I like about it, but there are some things that I dislike about it, especially when it comes to the gas tank. I think that's the biggest downside to this bike is the fact that you only have like a 2.5 gallon gas tank, which means about 150 miles of range. And for longer day trips, you're going to have to be filling it up constantly. Riding position, it could be a little more ergonomic for me as a tall rider, even though it does have a taller seat height. If I'm tucked on the bike for long periods of time, I do notice that my kind of knees get a little tired, so I want to look into extending the foot peg so that way I have a little bit more play with the ergonomics. We got to talk about the Ducati service tax, which is something that I haven't experienced yet, but for the times that I've had to go to get miscellaneous parts, they've been just twice, 3 times as expensive as I would think. I had to get an extra set of keys for this bike, and to go through that whole process was like $350, $400. So something that I'm not really looking forward to when I take it in to do the Desmo at the 7,000 mile mark. I'm only at 4,000 miles right now, but that's something that I got to keep in mind. Another thing that I dislike about this motorcycle is the fact that the air-cooled engine does get quite hot in the summer, or especially if you're just sitting at traffic, and you could really feel this heat, especially if you're not wearing any riding pants or Kevlar insulated riding gear. You're really going to notice that. That is something to pay in mind when you're riding this out in the heat. We got a bike coming by. I already mentioned the problem with the headlight. You can just upgrade them to both be LEDs. A design flaw actually that I found out that should be a non-negotiable if you plan to take this off-road is I've dropped the bike out in the dirt before and it's fallen on the rear brake side and immediately broke the sensor that runs to the rear taillight. So basically what happened is it broke and you can't engage the rear tail light. So I upgraded it with a hydraulic rear brake line. So that way, if I drop it ever again, I don't have to worry about the brake light being disengaged, which is just kind of like a safety thing. And I'll link a video that walks through that tutorial. Another thing, even though that this bike is powerful enough to get around LA, I find that the 8,000 rev limiter on this isn't all that great. I always feel like I want a little bit more out of the bike, but I kind of know that it's not meant for, high top end speed. It's meant for more kind of that low end grunt. So just like a trade-off with going with a bike like this, but still plenty of power and plenty of get up and go that you need for around here in LA. The other thing about this bike that you should know about is any type of service you do where you're disconnecting the battery, either intentionally or unintentionally. And I don't know if this is true across all Ducatis, but it resets the odometer on the digital gauge, which throws you off in terms of like, when should my next service be? It is all stored on the ECU, so if you go into Ducati and get it flashed, it'll be there, but if you ever disconnect the battery again, there it goes, and that's $70 down the drain. Ducati really doesn't want you working on your own bike, which for me, as someone who's a very DIY, I find that quite frustrating, to say the least. But yeah, that is my review. In a nutshell, this bike has thousands of miles on it that I've put since I've bought it. I've ridden it all up and down Northern California and gone to Yosemite on big trips and small trips. I haven't really taken it off-road, so I can't really talk to its off-road capabilities. This thing was meant to be more of like something that I ride around in town, so you'll have to find someone with more experience to talk about that. But for what my use case is, getting around town, cutting up traffic, having fun, just running errands and being out here in the mountains and knowing that I can take all my gear and camera gear with me is just fantastic. It did cost me a pretty penny. I paid about $12,000 for this and I'm still making payments on it. But would I buy it again? Definitely. I plan to put, thousands more miles on this after, obviously I get that Desmo service in a few. I would recommend this as maybe like your beginner bike. Even though it is 800 cc's, it's not like frightening power, frightening speed, and it gives you just enough of what you want for getting around town and doing all the bike things that you want. In a nutshell, Ducati Desert Sled, you're going to see more of it. That is what I've got for you today, and happy riding. I'll see you guys out there.